Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you very much. You can be seated. Today is the 79th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. In 1984, President Reagan gave what I thought was his most memorable speech on Normandy. I can think of no better way, no better tribute to honor President Reagan and the brave men and women of Normandy than to recite that famous speech. That speech was part of an introduction film that was played when I first attended my first Republican convention in 1984. There are several times that I've replayed that film on YouTube, and that speech, that excerpt, is probably one of the most favorite parts of that speech. So this afternoon, in honor of the brave men and women of Normandy and of President Reagan, I would like to recite that speech. We're here today to mark that day in history when the Allied armies joined in battle to reclaim this continent to liberty. For 4 long years, much of Europe had been under a terrible shadow. Free nations had fallen. Jews cried out in the camps. Millions cried out for liberation. Europe was enslaved, and the world prayed for its rescue. Here in Normandy, the rescue began. Here, the Allies stood and fought against tyranny in a giant undertaking unparalleled in human history. We stand on a lonely, windswept point on the northern shore of France. But 40 years ago, the air is soft here today. But 40 years ago, at this moment, the air was dense with smoke and the cries of men, and the air was filled with the crack of rifle fire and the roar of cannon. At dawn, on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. Their mission was one of the most difficult and daring of the invasion, to climb these steep and desolate cliffs and to take out the enemy guns. The Allies had been told that some of the mightiest of these guns were here, and they would be trained on the beaches to stop the Allied advance. The Rangers looked upon and saw the enemy soldiers, the edge of the cliffs, shooting down at them with machine guns and throwing grenades. And the Army Rangers began to climb. They shot rope ladders over the face of these cliffs and began to pull themselves up. When one Ranger fell, another would take its place. When one rope was cut, a Ranger would grab another and begin his climb again. They climbed, shot back, and held their footing. Soon, one by one, the Rangers pulled themselves over the top. And in seizing the firm land at the top of these cliffs, they began to seize back the continent of Europe. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. Only 90. Behind me is a memorial that symbolizes the Ranger daggers that were trussed into the top of these cliffs. And before me are the men who put them there. These are the boys upon a hook. These are the men who took to the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. These are the heroes who helped in the war. Gentlemen, I look at you and I think of the words of Stephen Spender's poem. You are the men who in your lives fought for life and left the vivid air signed with your honor. I think I know what you may be thinking right now. Thinking, we were just part of a bigger effort. Everyone was brave that day. Well, everyone was. Do you remember the story of Bill Millen of the 51st Highlanders? 40 years ago today, British troops were pinned down near a bridge waiting desperately for help. Suddenly, they heard the sound of bagpipes and some thought they were dreaming. Well, they weren't. They looked up and saw Bill Millen with his bagpipes leading the reinforcements and ignoring the smack of the bullets into the ground around him. Lord Lovat was with him, Lord Lovat of Scotland, who calmly announced when he got to the bridge, "Sorry, I'm a few minutes late," as if he'd been delayed by a traffic jam, and when in truth he had just come from the bloody fighting on Sword Beach, which he and his men had just taken. There was the impossible valor of the Poles, who threw themselves between enemy and the rest of Europe. As the invasion took hold, and the unprecedented courage of the Canadians who had already seen the horrors of war on this coast. They knew what awaited them, but they would not be deterred. And once they hit Juno Beach, they never looked back. All these men were part of a roll call of honor, with names that spoke of a pride as bright as the colors that they bore. The Royal Winnipeg Rifles, Poland's 24th Lancers, the Royal Scots Flusiliers, the Screaming Eagles, the Yeomen of England's armed divisions, the forces of Free France, the Coast Guard's Matchbox Fleet, and you, the American Rangers. 40 summers have passed since that battle you fought here. You were young the day you took these cliffs. Some of you were hardly more than boys, with the deepest joys of life before you. Yet, you risked everything here. Why? Why did you do that? What impelled you to put aside the instant for your self-preservation and risk your lives to take these cliffs? What inspired all the men of all the armies that met here? We look at you and we know the answer. It is faith and belief. It is loyalty and love. The men of Normandy had faith that they were doing the right thing. Faith that they fought for all of humanity. Faith that a just God would grant them mercy on this beachhead or in the next. It was the deep knowledge and pray God that we have not lost it. It is here. It is a profound moral difference between the use of force for liberation and the use of force for conquest. You were here to liberate, not to conquer. And so you and the others did not doubt your cause. You were right not to doubt. You all know that some things are worth dying for. One's country is worth dying for. And democracy is worth dying for. Because it's the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man. All of you love liberty. All of you were willing to fight tyranny. And you know the people of your countries were behind you. The Americans who fought here that morning knew the word of the invasion was spreading throughout the darkness back home. They fought. They fought in their hearts that they couldn't know, in fact, that in Georgia, they were filling the churches at 4 a.m. In Kansas, they were kneeling on the porches and praying. And in Philadelphia, they were ringing the Liberty Bell. Something else helped the day of D-Day, the Rockland belief that Providence would have a great hand in the events that would unfold here. That God was an ally in this great cause. And so the night before the invasion, when Colonel Warburton asked his parachute troopers to kneel with him in prayer, he told them, "Do not bow your heads, but look up so you can see God and ask His blessing on what we're about to do." Also that night, General Matthew Ridgway, on his cot, listening in the darkness for the promise God made to Joshua, "I will not flee, I will not fail thee or forsake thee." These are the things that impelled them. These are the things that shaped the unity of the Allies. When the war was over, there were lives to be rebuilt and governments to be returned to the people. There were nations to be reborn. Above all, there was a new peace to be assured. These were huge and daunting tasks, but the Allies summoned strength from faith, belief, loyalty, and love of those who fell here. They rebuilt a new Europe. There was first a great reconciliation among these who had been enemies. All of them had suffered so greatly. The United States did its part, creating a Marshall Plan to help rebuild our allies and our former enemies. The Marshall Plan led to the Atlantic Alliance, a great alliance that serves to this day as a shield of our freedom, for prosperity, and for peace. In spite of our greatest efforts and successes, not all that followed the end of the war was happy or planned. Some liberated countries were lost. The great sadness of this loss echoes down to our own time in the streets of Warsaw, Prague, and East Berlin. Soviet troops that came to the center of this continent did not leave. When peace came, they were still there, uninvited, unwanted, unyielding, almost 40 years after that war. Because of this, Allied forces still stand on this continent today as 40 years ago. Our armies are here for only one purpose: to protect and defend democracy. The only territories we hold are memorials, like this one, in the graveyards where our heroes rest. We in America have learned the bitter lessons from 2 world wars. It is better to be here, ready to protect the peace, than to take blind shelter across the sea. Rushing to suspend only after freedom is lost. Rushing to respond only after freedom is lost. We learned that isolationism never was and never will be an acceptable response to tyrannical governments with expansionist intent. But we try always to be prepared for peace, prepared to defer aggression, prepared to negotiate the reduction of arms, and yes, prepared to reach out again in the spirit of reconciliation and truth. There was no reconciliation. We would welcome more than a reconciliation with the Soviet Union. So together, we can lessen the risk of war, now and forever. It's fitting to remember here the great losses also suffered by the Russian people during World War II. 20 million perished, a terrible price that testifies to all the world the necessity of ending war. I tell you from my heart that we in the United States do not want war. We want to wipe war away from the face of the earth. The terrible weapons that man has now in his hands, and I tell you, we are ready to seize that beachhead. We look for some sign from the Soviet Union that they're willing to move forward, that they will share our desire and love for peace, and that they will give up the ways of conquest. There must be a changing there that will allow us to turn our hope into action. We pray forever that someday that changing will come. But for now, particularly today, It is good and fitting to renew our commitment to each other, to our freedom, and to the alliance that protects it. We are bound today by what bound us 40 years ago, the same loyalties, traditions, and beliefs. We're bound by reality. The strength of America's allies is vital to the United States, and the American security guarantee is essential to the continued freedom of Europe's democracies. We were with you then, and we are with you now. Your hopes are our hopes, and your destiny is our destiny. Here in this place, here the West held together. Let us make a vow to our dead. Let us show them by our actions that we understand what they died for. Let our actions say to them the words for which Matthew Ridgway listened: I will not fail thee or forsake thee. Strengthened by their courage, heartened by their valor, and borne by their memory, let's continue to stand for the values they believed in and died for. Ladies and gentlemen, this speech was written in 1984. And I believe the words are still important today. We must end wars. We must end conquest of lands. We must start getting along with one another. We have this one planet to live on. And it's up to us to take care of it and take care of each other. May God bless you. May God bless the United States of America, and may God bless our troops. Thank you all very much. Thank you.